Hi, my name is Jenny-Lynn Hall. I'm the co-director of the Visiting Artist Program here at Gallery Route 1. This program is located in a gallery which we call Project Space and was founded to show artists working with the themes of the environment, social justice, and immigration. We're thrilled to have Patricia Thomas showing with us now. Her work addresses head-on the issue of income inequality, and also that this is racially influenced. In the Bay Area, this is so critical that we look at this, and we're just thrilled to have someone who's doing that. So here's Patricia to talk about her work.
Hi, I'm Patricia Thomas, and the title of my exhibition is To Have or To Have Not, which pretty much sums it up. This body of work, I'm trying to contrast chandeliers and homeless tents to illuminate the widening gap between wealth and poverty. The inspiration for this work, or the background to this work, is that I lived in West Oakland in a low-income neighborhood for 25 years. And then I moved to West Marin a little over 10 years ago. The time I spent in Oakland just watching the number of homeless tents grow to large encampments that we have now. So I'm just trying to make some sort of contrast and connection between these two extremes. So the symbol that I locked on first for wealth was the chandelier. Seems like it's a lighting fixture that's been used for centuries now, and to me it represents opulence and wealth and beauty. So I felt that that would be a good symbol to contrast with homeless tents. And I've tried to paint the tents in bright, vivid colors to draw attention, because I think there's a temptation to avert our gaze from the situation of economic inequality and racial discrimination that come to the fore in these situations, these large encampments of people that can't afford to have a roof over their head. And I've painted them in bright colors, and also I've included these strange little figures that I call familiars. They're like guardians or benevolent spirits that, I want the tents to represent sort of the power that these people that live there, their endurance. I'm kind of amazed by them. So anyway, again, contrasting those two things. And then this large checkerboard drawing that I did was inspired by a statistic that I heard about police violence against people of color. That this type of violence was 21 times more likely to occur against people of color. But I deliberately, in this drawing, I wanted to not be specific about that statistic. I wanted it to be a little more ambiguous, that it might stimulate thought about what might be 21 times more likely. So contrasting those words with the chandelier again, to maybe raise the question of, is it wealth or poverty that might be the thing that would be more likely to happen, and to whom would it happen? My most recent work has been a chandelier that is very sort of tacky and gaudy. And I've filled it with silver and gold houses, small little houses, very simply shaped. The title of this piece is Fulfillment Center. So just thinking about, beginning to think about consumption and what we need to live and what we might, what is necessary to live and what might be bordering on overconsumption. So thinking about that. And then this large piece that I did called Stuck in Suez was based on hearing about the container ship that became stuck in the Suez Canal. So I kind of am latching on to that as a symbol of all of this stuff that we're buying all the time and how it comes to us. And I again topped it with my favorite symbol, the chandelier, just to kind of look like there's so much stuff here that these chandeliers didn't fit into the container. And so they're resting on the top. I think they're kind of insect-like or almost a little bit frightening. And that was something I was hoping to, that it would kind of communicate a sort of a slightly frightening quality to this container ship that is stuck in the Suez Canal. So the ultimate question, I think, in the show is like, I'm trying to get to, how much is enough?
What was the specific 21 times that you saw the quote?
Well, I don't really want to say.
Oh, okay.
But I guess I will, because you've asked. It's that the statistic I heard was that black male teenagers are 21 times more likely to be shot and killed by the police than white male teenagers. So, that's a pretty dramatic statement, 21 times. So that's why I wanted to make it sort of large, to maybe it sinks in more if it's large. But I really did want it to be, not put it in the drawing. I wanted it to be as opposed to these chandeliers that you might think about, is it 21 times more likely to have wealth? Is it 21 times more likely to live in poverty, based on, who you are? So that's why I deliberately didn't, finish out the statistic in it, so that it could be applied to other things. Thanks. Randall.
I've seen work you've done before, earlier, some of your work, very much. This social involvement and economic, let's say, involvement, is that relatively a new direction for you? Or
This chandelier piece that's in here is, I think, 2012. Mm-hmm. So it's,
Yeah, so it's been
so
hanging
at
around.
least, trying to, I didn't, the homeless shelters only for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
But I was, I think I was trying to struggle to look at more myself as a privileged person.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Gotcha.
And so, trying to look, I don't think I can talk about the experience of homeless people,
Yeah.
but I can talk about my experience as a white person who, not wealthy, but,
Right.
roof over my head. So to just, use the chandelier as kind of for me, it kind of represents that
Gotcha.
difference.
Okay. Thanks.
So.
Hi, I'm Jenny-Lynn Hall, and this is my own work. I'm an artist member of Gallery Route 1, and before, when I was introducing Patricia's work, it was in my function as co-director of the project space, but as artist members, we have solo shows, and it's my turn. So this is my most current work. It's all from essentially the past 6 months. The show's entitled Winter Solstice. I generally start a series when I'm getting ready for a show. I usually have a theme in mind, and nothing was essentially coming to me, but I had been chosen to do a piece to interpret a poem for a show called Reverberations in Sebastopol And the poem was called Solstice 2020. And the imagery in that resonated with me really strongly. And so I did the piece for that show, which is not included here. It will be published later in May as part of that show. But it really inspired this whole body of work. And the poem deals with light going into the darkened trenches and healing the ache that brings the meanness. And I felt like in the past couple of years that there was so much that I had been burying, and so much just tension and fear in the world that we live in, and it had affected me a lot more than I really was consciously aware of. And it was through working on these paintings that I was able to address that. Some of the first ones that came out that I considered done were really a lot more dark. There are two called Distanced, and they're almost black. There's just the tiniest bit of light, and they seem to be searching for the light that is faint. And it's winter solstice is the darkest time of the year, and so I was feeling that this was a really just dark time in which I was questioning a lot of things about the world that I live in. And so I gradually worked with that and tried to find light both within myself and in the painting. So as the work goes on in time, there is lightness that comes in. So this show is really a personal journey, a lot more personal than I'm used to working with or speaking about. I'm feeling like I'm out on a limb here. But there you have it. One of the key pieces in the piece is a mural that I did after my golden retriever Cleo died, and the piece is called April 9th, 2017, which is the day that she died. And the stars in the sky of this mural are above Dillon Beach, and at the exact time when she died. And so I used to take her there a lot, and I'd found some constellation maps and just included them all in this piece, and just did drawings of her kind of ascending. And since death is a transformation, I included it here. So I just thought it was kind of a relevant part of the show. Some of the pieces are only illuminated by graphite, and so the light is just a shimmering on the surface of the texture. Ultimately, it's a classic study of the tension between light and dark, both metaphorically and through the craft of painting. And I've been working a lot in the past, 7 years or so on landscape, so there's definitely a predominant horizon line. But I've also been working with just opposites existing in the same painting. So I like the idea that if the sea or the sky is painted with texture, it kind of contrasts the idea that they're generally ethereal. And so it's just getting people to think about opposites and life and death, heaviness and lightness. And then at a certain point, I felt like the light just really had to come through. There's a piece called Big Bang in this show, and it's just about the energy of light. I also like to work in sequences, so there are a couple of sequences in the show that are much smaller paintings, and they go from light to dark. So they're about light emerging or emerging and then going more to darkness, or starting with darkness and going more to light. I thought it was important that at a certain point, the work became more energetic as opposed to just being more subjective and elegant and calm. Ultimately, the last piece in the show, which I can talk about in a second when we move around with the camera, is just about warm light and really about gratitude, about letting love in. It's called Dear Heart, and it's about warm light and embracing that.
I'm interested in the technique of this. It's the pigment applied on top of the plasterwork?
So this is done with a bunch of different layers of plaster. Working in plaster is kind of a play between opacity and transparency. And so the bottom layers here, you can see how there's a lot of thick colors that are coming in. And then just to create movement, I'll go over with much thinner layers, which permeate a lot of the gaps. In this case, the base coat that I typically use in this one also is, it's from Rosso Verona marble powder, so it's sort of a pinkish color, and so it gives a warmth to all the work. It's a pretty significant texture actually on the base of all these pieces. So the plasters are colored, and this actually in the underlayers I used a lot more color, and then cover them up with different glazings. And the glazes I make also from powdered pigments, so they're very, very liquid, and I use I make glazes out of graphite, but also out of different colors. So these are different. This is a color I love called Maya Blue, and this is actually painted on. So I can also make my own paints with the plaster that is perfectly compatible with it. Doing something like this is there's a lot of experimentation. The plaster was initially designed to be a flooring material, and I lived in Italy for 11 years and actually worked as an applier of this plaster. And then my partner and I started to use it as a painting medium. And then since I've been back in the United States, I've just really pushed the experimentation of the medium, which has involved me led to making pigments and paints and all that kind of thing with it. And that's one thing that I really like about working with this technique is the experimental component. Thank you. And then it's obviously influenced by Anselm Kiefer. So a lot of the drawing is in chalk over it. He did a series with ducks in the sky and numbered the constellations. And these are the constellations in the sky when my dog Cleo died. So it's still in beach, so you can see the peninsula. And then she died at 5 in the morning, and this is what would have been in the sky then. And so I just drew her in chalk, it's about transcendence.
I'm Robin Dintiman. This is my show called Skin, Everybody Has One. And the idea started with the death of my mother 22 years ago and spreading her ashes just before COVID back east. And then when I came back and was in lockdown for almost 2 years, I was working very long hours to learn how to grow vegan leather. And I had done a series. This piece is called Batwing, and this is the stages of vegan leather. This is a thin one. This is a really thick one. So you really can grow it almost like rawhide. The series of 7 photographs here are a series about my mother called Silenced We Too, T-O-O. She was a very frustrated 50s, 60s, 40s, 50s, 60s housewife and was incredibly creative, but very stifled, spending a lot of time raising 4 children. Masked, burqa, face, reflect, facing the river, and then angst, and silenced. These were things I imagined that she went through because of her frustration with not being able to really do her career. And then we have a lot of variations on the vegan leather. This particular piece is ongoing. It is a antique embroidered tablecloth from the 1840s, 1850s, and I've encased it in vegan leather. Stitching it, having it grow together. As you put layers on, it grows together. And continuing thicker pieces, flowers embroidered into it. There's feathers, beads, all kinds of things. And it's fairly sturdy. This doesn't, like you can't tear it. You have to cut it just like fabric. This little piece is Abandoned Child, shard. And this little piece is also an abandoned child. The idea being that children are being left when there's this pandemic and they're being left at the border, motherless. And so they have a lot of issues. This is one of her gloves that only was one-handed. I found one of them. It's two. So they're very different textures I can get with the leather. So I have a lot of variations on things that were my mother's things, buttons and her gloves, ribbons, but all kinds of personal items. So it was the tension between her as a creative person and a 50s, 60s mom, and the conflict that she had with having children and having to spend so much time taking care of them, and maybe not being able to do it as well as she had hoped. This piece is washed away. This is a child's skull cap for christening, and like if you found it near a river. This piece is just a giant piece that has a lot of dimension, almost like a piece of seaweed at the ocean. And it's also, I can hold this up, it's also quite heavy, pliable, dimensional, just like leather. Pretty indestructible. And this whole piece is linen, Hemi Linen, with the offset print block printed onto the white fabric as I was drying all of the skins over the, this wasn't even a year's worth. This is like half a year's worth. And I have many more of these fabrics. And the variation in color and texture is because of the dark and light of the skins and these other little child's items. And you can see that as these got moved a little bit. They're very pliable. I can make them pliable, and then sometimes they're very stiff. So I'm still in the process of learning with the making of them. And this one had some bubbles in it. Yep, still does. Here's one. Oops. With a lizard that had dried in my paper stack, and I felt really bad, so I encased him, so he's totally encased in leather, preserved, like an artifact. All of these things relate to art, archaeology digs and the natural world and our disintegration and our life. So what I'm going to do is turn this on and we can see the stuff possibly a little better. Oh, this is a bronze. It's also made with wax, brown wax. Oh, I stuck it to the floor. With my hands on the hot wax. Kind of what I do a lot is the use of my hands and the handprint. And the evidence of the human touch. The theme throughout a lot of this is the evidence of the human touch and how important that is for making art, of course. The liminal experience, the experience of our hands inform our brain and push our thinking. So, for example, this week, there was a archaeological show about more things that they found at Stonehenge. And one of the oldest pieces they have is from 950 million years ago of a child's hands on some kind of surface. They don't know what it is, but it's basically showing, and they have a little ruler there, showing that even children back, over 10 million years ago or 100 million years ago, were making art. And that's, for me, the most important thing about doing any of this is that it informs us to become ourselves, to feel ourselves in the world and express ourselves in the world.
Is something going to eat it? I mean, if you have it sitting on your table, are there animals that are going to come?
No, actually, I have had it in my studio, and even in Oakland, I have tons of it. It's like, I was worried about the fires, and so, because we're in the fire zone, and nothing's happened to it.
That was my question. Then you sit there eating it, and I
Well,
thought,
if anybody's seen how they make balsamic vinegar in Italy, probably Jenny-Lynn has, there's giant vats and tons of fruit flies, and they don't worry about it. They just have cheesecloth, and they don't worry about the health department, and it's the best vinegar in the world. Yeah. Same thing happens in my studio. In the summer when it's really hot, I got fruit flies, and I hang these, fly traps, or just it's little gnats. It's not really.
To make it artful.
Yes. Gets caught in my hair, but it's an organic thing, and I'm sure that the newt that's in there got squished in between some things like papers, and he died, and I felt terrible because he died. He kind of like got petrified, so I put skins around him so he's forever preserved.
Oh, I want to go see.
I'll show you. It's a real newt. So this is how thin they can be, and how. Yeah. And I mean, I can get one. I'll pass one around so you can touch it. This is from the top of your round container.
Lovely. Good to know.
I'll just pass this around. It's really not. It's just don't spill water on it. And you can feel how incredible. I mean, as soon as you feel it, you go, whoa, and that's just like us.
And what do you make it out of again?
Sugar, water, and yeast.
That's it.
Yes, and my grandfather was a botanist, and he actually had a book that I used to scribble in, right? And during COVID, I thought, well, I'll read the book. Only took me 60-something years to do it, right? And in that book, his first experiment is sugar, things that in sugar and water, what they make. It was astonishing. And yeast is in the air, especially in Oakland. Yeah. But I was thinking of making a little pot here and see what happens if I grow just.
Yeah, no, that's how they make sourdough.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Kombucha, all the ciders, it all uses that yeast stuff. And I ate bourgeois for years, so now I'm making something out of it.
All right, yeah.